Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our uh, monthly contributors and our one time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, a neighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. Christ versus the Grand Inquisitor. That's the title of the new article from Surat Dasgupta on our website at a neighborschoice.com. I'm your host, David Gornoski, here with Surat. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
First, let's talk about the artwork you chose here. What is this picture of Jesus? I saw this. I've never seen this picture, and it almost has an alien look to it, like a gray alien. I've been talking about aliens a lot with guests recently. It had, if you haven't seen it, folks, go to a neighborschoice.com and you'll see it there with the title Christ versus the Grand Inquisitor. And there's a picture of looks like Jesus with a kind of a oval head with a narrow chin and a big forehead. And then it's got this you could describe what this other piece of art is. Tell us what this Jesus imagery is. Is this something you're familiar
Well,
with, or
there's
just liked
your
it?
is a connection to ancient aliens, I guess.
Is it really?
But no, a lot of those ancient Russian icons look like that.
Okay.
It's like if you look up Andrei Rublev's icons, they're more or less the same. So they're a weird mixture of Byzantine style and probably something native to the Russians that was outside of Christianity that got blended in. But it got progressively more and more realistic, more enlightenment based as the years went on, and less Byzantine. I'm talking about the Russian iconographic style.
You know when this
So
dates back to, this particular depiction?
probably around the time of Rublev, I guess, during the Middle Ages,
Okay.
right after the fall of the Byzantine Empire.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date, but kind of like 12th, 13th century, I guess.
And what's this other image to the right of it? What is this?
The
This.
other image is probably by some contemporary artist as an illustration of the Grand Inquisitor.
Okay.
You can see the priestly vestments on that character.
So this is. Tell us a little bit about this article. What you set out to post in this essay.
Yeah, well, Dostoevsky has always been my favorite author, and this article is not too much focused on his work as much as it's focused on Berdyaev's commentary on Dostoevsky. So basically, the article is a commentary on a commentary on a commentary of a poem that's found inside a novel.
Wow, man,
So that's like well, I mean, by the time it
you have a,
reads,
this is a very Talmudic style article, then, isn't it? You're just commenting on commenting on commenting on commenting, right?
yeah, Yeah, and the novel is Brothers Karamazov. It's the last novel by Dostoevsky, and if I would recommend, of course, Dostoevsky's books are very heavy. They take time to get into, so a lot of commentary. People could use a lot of commentary to get into his work. Aside from Rene Girard's book on Dostoevsky, I highly recommend Berdyaev's book on Dostoevsky as well, because Berdyaev
Tell us the
not
full
only,
name of Berdyaev and who he is for folks who've not heard of him.
yeah, Nikolai Berdyaev was the early 20th century Russian existentialist
Okay.
philosopher, and he focused on creativity and slavery and freedom, these topics. He was really hyper focused on, particularly on creativity and what constitutes freedom. So he looks at freedom from a very existentialist point of view, kind of like carrying the torch on from Dostoevsky and his peers. So Berdyaev wrote this book on Dostoevsky. He's like, it's more or less his interpretation of his of Dostoevsky's book, and he not only points out Dostoevsky's blind spots with regards to traditionalist values and monarchy and all of that, but he also makes a very good case of why Dostoevsky is unlike any other author, in that his work is particularly apocalyptic, and he lived in a time. This is Dostoevsky. He lived in a time between modernity and uh, the period before. So he was in this time in Russia where, like, you had the all of this influx of ideas from uh, the liberal West, and it was clashing with the more pro-monarchy traditionalist ideas of Russia. So you had the conflict between revolutionaries and czarists. So Dostoevsky, of course, he felt he chose to be on the side of the czarists, but he was also a bit of an outsider because he was not really accepted by the the monarchists and the your typical orthodox ascetics. Like whenever this is brought up by Berdyaev, whenever Dostoevsky frequented these monasteries, his ideas would not really be accepted back in his time. It was only way after he died, he came to be known as kind of a champion of orthodoxy. But in his own time, he was really uh, on the margins. He was not really, because he was in a lot of ways modernist himself. He did not label himself as such, but it's clear as day in his work that he was uh, like he himself said that he's a child of his time, and he could not help but get influenced by his time. About Girard's book, uh,
What's Gerard's book with Dostoevsky? What's it called for folks that want to look it up?
it's called From the Underground, I believe. Uh, and it's and Girard has a very fascinating, very unique approach to Dostoevsky, in that Dostoevsky's early work, which was during his socialist time. Dostoevsky in his younger days, before he was exiled, was basically a socialist. So his early work were all variations of the love triangle in one form or another. So Girard kind of deconstructed all of them to show how Dostoevsky had a very unique insight into uh, breaking down mimetic rivalries, mimetic romances, and relationships. How yeah, and this is a lot of it from a lot of it was, of course, from his own life. So, and yeah, and then he got arrested because he was a socialist, and he was about to be executed, but at the last moment, he was pardoned by the Tsar, and that kind of had a very profound effect on Dostoevsky, and to the extent that he started having seizures, epileptic fits, till the day he died, and his work from then on reflected that state that he was, it was growing more and more turmoil. He was touching on, existential topics like God, theodicy, and one of those topics, of course, is the relationship between power and liberty.
Yeah.
And that's touched upon by Dostoevsky in this short section of the Brothers Karamazov called The Grand Inquisitor. So, in that poem, in that section of the novel, we see that two brothers. One brother is basically like, his name is Alexei, and he is trying to be, like the desert fathers and the monastics. He's a novice monk, and he's a monk in training, and he's trying to be like the poster child of orthodox asceticism. And this is the younger brother, and the older brother, Ivan Karamazov, is a very highly intelligent intellectual. He's an atheist. He is rational, but he's not like your run-of-the-mill atheist who insists that God doesn't exist, and all of his polemics revolve around that. He's the kind of atheist who he is on the borders of being a nihilist, and he is one of those really honest atheists who know the consequences of what it means to not believe in God. So this is, of course, Dostoevsky's has a he had a habit of creating great atheistic characters. Like not just bumbling caricatures or anything, but really highly sophisticated, intelligent people. So Ivan presents this poem called The Grand Inquisitor to his brother, and this poem tells of the story of when, like it's a fictional poem. It tells of the story of how Christ returns to Earth, but this time in medieval Spain, in a town called Seville, during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And the Grand Inquisitor, who is burning heretics at the stake, so that so that power is the church's influence on the masses are preserved, is maintained, and nothing gets rid of that.
Yeah.
So, but this is a very peculiar confrontation, in that when Christ he comes to Spain, and he starts healing people. He starts healing the blind, and healing the disabled. But the Grand Inquisitor sees this, and he immediately has Christ arrested, because the people were flocking to him. So when why he has Christ imprisoned, he lays it all out when he interrogates Christ in prison, and he makes the case like this. The Grand Inquisitor character, he's not really a believer at all, even though he is in priestly garb. He's he doesn't believe in God, but he believes that freedom destroys humanity, and because human beings are not really mature, human beings are not really to the, highly elevated to that extent where they can handle freedom, right? So they need somebody to enforce authoritarianism onto the masses, e- even though it can be in Christ's name. So he says that, like, he says that to Christ, that you gave these people freedom and you had too much faith in human beings, and that will be your downfall, because human beings cannot handle that extent of freedom. They cannot, if they are truly free, they will just chaotic, they will be, it will be completely anarchic, right? Like, it will be anybody can do anything, what they want. So these people, they willingly laid down their freedom, so at my feet, at the Grand Inquisitor's feet, so that they can be, true, they can say that they are truly free, right? And so yeah, that's like the beginning point of the novel.
What
And
does Jesus say to that in that story?
Jesus doesn't say anything in the entirety of the poem. It's just the ramblings of the Grand Inquisitor.
What does Jesus do?
Well, after this continued rambling of the Grand Inquisitor, which Berdyaev, you know picks apart in his book, Christ does nothing but kiss him. You know, like, it's like a non-violent, compassionate, for forgiveness of the tyrant. So that's like a very anti-Marxist thing, I guess, because he doesn't really execute or scapegoat
There's
the
no, he
Grand
doesn't do a
Inquisitor.
low blow, right?
No, no, he just kisses the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor, completely loses it, uh, turns him out of the city, out of, into the darkness. The Grand Inquisitor doesn't even like. He says that he's going to burn Jesus at the stake during this rambling, but after Jesus kisses him, he doesn't even do that. He just sets him free, because he's just astonished. He don't doesn't know what to do. So but this entire poem is meant to be a refutation of Christ's mission on earth. But it really, like, Dostoevsky writes in such a way that it really makes the case of why Christ's incarnation is so apocalyptic, and why, you can't ignore Christ. Like, that's the vibe that comes out from this poem. Like, you can't ignore Christ because he has opened Pandora's box on humanity, and the only way you can really uh you know stop the apocalyptic unraveling, of Christ's message, is you can enforce power, iron fist like power on the masses, and you enforce it in Christ's name.
Mhm.
So that was what people were doing during the medieval times, right? They were enforcing authoritarianism, old might makes right style authoritarianism, but they were doing it in Jesus's name. And
I thought a lot of the people who like medievalism are fans of Dostoevsky and Berdyaev.
yeah, well, they have to read the actual work, because they would find a lot of objectionable things, to their life. They would find a lot of things that they would not like themselves, because Dostoevsky, all of these really traditionalists, all of these people, they like the death penalty, for example. Dostoevsky hated the death penalty because he almost got executed himself. And in one of his books, he writes about a person being guillotined. There's this character, one of his leading characters describes the execution that takes place in France with the guillotine, and just makes a case that this might be much more horrible than, simply killing the man, or like imprisoning him or whatever. This has to be much more crueler, because uh, when a man has received his death sentence, he knows that his time is coming. So imagine being in that frame of mind where you know that where you know that death is certain and you're going to die. So like every minute, every second is like a torture on you, right? You're begging them to get it over with, but you know that it's a slow burn, like almost Pavlovian uh, kind of death, in opposition to the more cruel, torturous kinds of deaths that we find in pre-Christian ancient times.
What did Berjayev and Dostoevsky think about, Enlightenment, Western views of freedom, like positive freedom and negative freedom, where you have John Locke and he's talking about negative freedom, then you have Rousseau and folks talking, and John Stewart, Jeremy Bentham talking about like positive freedom, like negative freedom being like negations of government coercion into your life, liberty and property, and then positive freedoms being a freedom to food, freedom to health care or whatever, freedom to medicine, freedom to shelter, like the man, there's that's where you get kind of the classical liberal versus the progressive divide between like, your freedom is conceived as a negation of intrusions into your life, your liberty to pursue what you want, and the extension of your bodily, your ownership of your body in relationship to other people, and its extensions in the form of property and labor and things like that. That's like a negative freedom concept. And then positive freedom, where it's like, positive liberty is this idea of like, well, man's not truly free until he is, free from hunger and free from poverty and free from illness and free from homelessness and destitution. And once he has those things, that's what it means to attain positive freedom. A positive assertion of something, a right to something. How would Dostoevsky and Berjayev, and I know I'm putting you on a spot, it might be outside of the purview of the article if you don't want to go there, but how do they see those types of freedom? Because you said they're both interested in freedom.
They both looked at freedom very existentially. So they did not necessarily become objectors of Western concepts of liberty, the things that you've described, but they sort of did push back on those concepts in terms of like you need like true freedom can only come from a Christian God or Christian kind of transcendent ideal, right? So if
They
that is
didn't. They
not the
didn't
starting
assume. In
point.
other words, they didn't assume like a neutral space by which reason could get you to freedom outside of Christian revelation.
No, no,
Right.
no, actually, yeah, they did not. They had to they asserted that you need to have a Christian uh framework from which true freedom can uh emanate. So I don't think neither of them believed that true freedom can exist within the sphere of neutrality. It had to be within the sphere of Christian morality. Uh, that's like one of the key arguments of Dostoevsky's work later, especially his later work, is that without God, anything is permitted. So you can still have that kind of libertarian approach, but it still would not really give you a moral society, a society, uh, trying to get to a higher standard, because that society does not transcendently believe in anything,
Mhm.
even though they might have the political uh, awakening, they might have the true political takes, but yeah, I think that's what Dostoevsky believed. Berjayev was, as opposed to Dostoevsky, Berjayev was much more outspoken towards, uh, compulsive coercion from, a traditionalist perspective, because he was not particularly fond of the czar monarchy. So
Mhm.
he was much more anarchist in that perspective, because
Was he
he makes the
egalitarian, or was he egalitarian or no?
no, he was not. He was completely opposite of egalitarian. He believed that there is a kind of aristocracy in Christianity. Uh, there is a aristocratic freedom
But
in
he was
Christ.
against. But he was against the medievalist or the aristoc. He was
Yeah,
against the monarchist coercion.
yeah, yeah. He was against monarchist coercion because he did not believe that that was true aristocracy. He believed that it was worldly, that it was out of necessity, it was based on enslavement. He was completely against enslavement. So the
Was he for
Christian
like a
aristocracy,
republicanism then? Like a republicanism? Like that's kind of aristocracy in some view, you know? Like a
I think he was
representative
more,
republic.
even though he criticized, I don't think he would have been Republican. I think he would have been more towards something resembling anarchy, something like
Like
that.
a
So
would that be like Kropotkin, kind of that kind of thing, like an anarcho mutualism or something like socialistic anarchism or
I'm not sure. I mean, he also criticized. He also, like typical existentialists. He also criticizes anarchism.
yeah.
But he does make the statement that God's freedom is much more rooted in anarchy than in
What
socialism.
does he mean by
Or
anarchy? Does he mean it in relationship to a monopolist state, or does he mean it like in some other type of way?
he means anarchy in the sense that no ruler has the authority to com- you know compel you to do something by force. So it's very difficult to say whether he wanted which form of government he wanted, because that area of history is not really like so much removed from our time in
Mm.
terms of what makes for conservatism or what makes for liberalism. So back then, conservatism meant something very
Yeah,
different, and as a result of this, if you read Barjayev's book, when he's criticizing conservatism, when he's criticizing monarchism and socialism, you kind of have to do a little bit of research of what he was actually criticizing,
yeah,
because socialism now with the Bernie Sanders kind of thing was completely different, because back then even socialists were conservative, like in terms of family and all of that. But apparently now nothing is off limits, I guess.
but yeah, but he would he have recognized compulsion and coercion like in classical frameworks, like putting people in
Yeah.
a prison for getting high, or draft
Mhm.
dodging, or taxes, imprisoning for taxes. Like he would consider that coercion and
Yeah,
compulsion.
he he did not specifically name those things, but he kind of attacked the presupposition of all of those things, which is that he makes the case that government is basically like Caiaphas saying that it is better for one man to
Yeah,
die for the entire nation. So this is basically the
that's
root,
what
the
Girard says
foundation
too.
of all government.
Yeah,
Oh, that's yeah, that's interesting. So
yeah.
there is a bit of overlap there between
He
Gerard
says
and Bajai.
Gerard says that Caiaphas's claim that it's better that one man die than the whole nation perish is at the
But
heart of politics. Is
does
it the
Gerard link it to government, human
yeah
government, or does he like? Oh, he
yeah
does.
yeah
Oh,
he does that in like particularly like in I see Satan fall like lightning. He talks about like um how Caiaphas is revealing the very essence of the powers and principalities that Paul's talking about, that these
yeah.
political powers and structures of society. But
Mhm.
Gerard does not have, an overtly, he kind of plays and dances around the implications of that. So he doesn't say, so therefore, because he's very careful to say Paul has this kind of ambivalent relationship, in his view, an ambivalent relationship to the powers, wherein, yes, they are satanic in the sense that they are founded on accusation and murder of common, enemies. But at the same time, he takes some of Paul's texts, like Romans 12 and so forth, to be indicative that while there is a satanic element to the powers, we also can't strive for their elimination lest we open up the chaos of undifferentiation and that type of evil. So it's not an anarchistic thrust, so to speak, from Girard, but I do think that there's an anarchistic implication about
Yeah,
his.
he kind of gets to the
Yeah,
core of the politics, the prerequisite, or the not the prerequisite, the presuppositions
yeah,
behind the
yeah.
all of that. So yeah, yeah, that's definitely what Barjayev does as well. But only that Barjayev does outright criticize socialism. He outright criticizes communism. He calls them the philosophies of the Antichrist,
What does he think
and
about private property? Does he talk about that?
it's not, he isn't specific with that, but he does make the case that this like attachment to possessions is also like is part of the fallen nature in
Yeah.
humanity, and that's like also kind of enslavement. So he's going all in all directions, I guess. but he does not really attack libertarianism, or what the kind of uh, political theories that are around right now.
Yeah,
But
that's not the
he does.
context that he's. That's not really a popular
Right,
thought.
that's not the context. Yes, yes. But he does outright attack medieval style monarchism and communism. He treats them all the same way. He likens them to the Grand Inquisitor found in the poem. So like that, everything has to be through the use of force, through the use of slavery, and all of that. So yeah, he outright compares the Grand Inquisitor figure, which is a very villainous figure. Every literary critic agrees that that's a villainous figure, and he likens them to socialists. Not even, he does not even say that socialism and is some bit of socialism is
Yeah.
good, communism is evil. He attacks socialism just like he attacks communism.
Why do you think that so many of these Russian thinkers are the ones that touch upon the anarchistic implications of Christianity more than in that time period, more than other Christians from other countries and other traditions and other time periods?
Well, you have to. There's only a specific few Russian writers who touch on these issues, like Vladimir Soloviev and Tolstoy. Tolstoy was a famous Christian anarchist, and Dostoevsky. Would not consider himself anarchism, but he does lay the ground for criticizing force, government force, or force in the name of God. So you have to recognize that this particular uh, movement, literally movement, was at a very specific time where there was a clash between liberals, Enlightenment style liberalism, not only like liberalism, but like outright. anarcho-communism. You know, there were like many people don't realize that prior to the Bolshevik Revolution, there were many revolutions in the 19th century, the Decembrist uprising, and the circles which Dostoevsky himself was part of. So there were all of these clashes of intellectual clashes, sometimes also physical. So in within these clashes, certain people are forced to look at the gospel through a very unusual kind of
Yeah.
way. There's no choice. Like it's kind of like our time in a lot of ways, isn't it? Because we are seeing, we've already seen that we have been disenchanted with the classical forms of conservatism. We've been disenchanted with the democratic socialism, and we've been disenchanted with a lot of things. And now, like, we're moving towards a much more uh populist kind of movement, where people are supporting conservatism, but they're not for the conservative establishment, right? So that's because that's how human beings are forced to look to other avenues. And these people that we talk about in the Russian, prior to the like in that period, just prior to the Bolshevik revolution, it was in a lot of ways a golden age of Russian literature. Like if you ask a person who's delving into Russian literature, like 9 times out of 10, they're going to name people from this era. So
So they saw so many
that's
regime
because,
change struggles that they saw the futility
yeah,
of government in a way that most people don't in that way.
right, because they considered themselves, closer to the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Like we are
Whereas British thinkers and stuff were enjoying a relatively stable
yeah,
regime.
they were enjoying a renaissance of sorts, right? Their colonies were expanding,
Yeah.
and they were
So they're
they're
trying to fine tune the elements of governance and tinker with it. Whereas the Russians that are saying
right.
these things are like, man, this whole thing is meaningless. There's no point in these governments and
Right.
their coercion attempts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you see the Russia of today as opposed to the Russians of that time, there's a stark difference. There's a lot of difference, even though like orthodoxy was also very influential back then, but it was really kind of like a very dialectic, confrontational kind of atmosphere back then. Nowadays, like everybody is behind the leader. It's very day and night.
Yeah. Um, so when you look at this, what are some things that we can learn from this? You know, I want people to read your article, but like kind of give them some takeaway points from this Grand Inquisitor poem. You have Berjayev says, in the end, truth springs from the contradictions in the ideas of the Grand Inquisitor. It stands out clearly among all the considerations that he marshals against it. He argues and persuades. He is a master of logic, and he is single mindedly set on the carrying out of a definite plan. But our Lord's silence is stronger and more convincing. What does that mean?
Yeah, so in the poem of the Grand Inquisitor, one of the reasons why Christ is silent throughout that poem is because Christ is like a shadowy character. Christ is like a ghost that looms over the Grand Inquisitor. So Grand Inquisitor is like a very tortured spirit in even though he really makes a lot of bold assertive claims on why we need to preserve this power. Christ looms over him. He haunts him, because the Grand Inquisitor knows, like, this is all hypocrisy, and he knows this is all hypocrisy. This is all contradictory, and we, the reader, also see the contradiction because no, if you are a man of God, if you are a man a man of the church, you cannot be killing people. You cannot be killing heretics. That is the complete opposite of what Christ says. Christ said to turn your cheek. right?
Yeah.
To not to repay evil with evil, not to resist violence with violence. But here, the Grand Inquisitor does everything opposite to Christ, but still carries the flag of Christ.
Yeah.
So that's like a haunting of Christ over him. That's what Barjayev, I think, says over there, is that Christ's silence is much more deafening than all of the ramblings of the Grand Inquisitor,
That's why I
because
say the biggest advocate of evil are all the supposed traditionalists and conservative Christians who can't shut up. If you would be silent sometimes and just let your actions do your talking, you could actually defeat a lot of these problems faster in some sense, right? In terms of not giving your nihilist establishment opponents a boogeyman to fight for the people in between to pick a side on. You could crush a lot of their ramblings with a kind of silence in that way,
yeah, it's like the
but
same
it's
thing
irresistible to
also.
talk, right? Right.
Right, right. Like you have to make so many, leaps, and so many. You have to do so much moonsaults and
Yeah.
somersaults in your argumentation if you are a Christian trying to argue for the case that you have to resist violence with violence. You have to you have to literally appeal to things beyond Christ. So that is why Christ, even today we can see how Christ haunts our culture, right?
Yeah.
Like we see all the violence and all of that, and people try to make an argument for preemptive violence by saying this person struck me, so I have to, like I am the victim here, so that's
Yeah.
why my violence is justified. So that we do that because we are trying to rationalize all the
Yeah.
things that we want to do as little pagans, but we can't do it. That's why, that's why we have to.
Yeah.
That's why our arguments are short-lived. They are easily exposed to the world, and that's what Barjayev means here when he says that the Grand Inquisitor contradicts himself in his ramblings. He's arguing endlessly, but he ends up contradicting himself over and over again, and that's the magic of Christ, right? That's what
What
Christ
does
does.
Gerard do? What does Gerard say about the Grand Inquisitor? How does he take that? Does he
I'll
believe?
have to
Yeah.
revisit his book
Okay.
because Girard also approaches that with a mimetic approach.
Yeah. Which I think is
Uh,
just another layer of the same,
yeah, good idea. That's a good idea for another
Yeah.
article,
How
probably.
does
Yeah,
Bert? Yeah, I would like to see. I would love to see like the overlay. I imagine it's very nice based on what you've told us about Berjayev's take on that. To see Gerard and Berjayev's overlay on that together and see the Venn diagram of kind of where their ideas come in contact and in a harmonious sense and maybe where they differ.
yeah, yeah.
Gerard is coming from a very um apocalyptic time too as a young French person, with the shadow
Right during the World War
World
Two.
War
Yeah.
II and Hitler and Stalin and France's role in that and coming to
He lived
America.
right to the like he even witnessed the terrorism 9/11 events and all of that. Imagine witnessing World War II and witnessing 9/11 in one lifetime.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's unreal.
yeah, yeah. That's for sure. So that's an incredible perspective to have that we can learn from. Well, I think it's interesting to look at these different pieces of literature and have them interact with our understanding of current events, and it fits well with my general critique of what I hear from the right, which is pining for a little Caesar to save them. And if it's not a little Caesar, pining for the use of hard politics to beat the opponents and defeat the left by any means necessary, because that's the only way we're going to have a chance of them not obliterating us. That kind of logic of the mimetic frenzy of that is a very dangerous place to go. It sounds like this is illustrating that in this piece of literature that you've looked at. At the end of your article, you say maybe the trajectory of history is neither cyclical nor progressive, but ascendant despite our resistance.
Yeah, so But there's this bit like if you talk to some of these talking heads that we find ourselves listening to nowadays, you'll see like a lot of them arguing about eschatology, right? Like what are the what the future holds for humanity, and is it like a lot of these traditional type thinkers ascribe to a much more cyclical view of history, right? So like yeah, I start off with this like approach in the article. I start off with this brief summation of how people argue whether history is cyclical or history is progressively linear. Uh, and much of that is the basis for how why they are such big fans of coercion. So, for example, to give you an illustration, uh, like if you talk to a regular traditionalist, who is a very politically educated traditionalist, yeah, that person would say we have to take power from the ones who have power right now. So
Because the problem
even
isn't power, the problem is power in the hands of degenerates. That's their issue.
yeah, but here's the thing. This really that is why there so much fans of cyclical history, is because they perpetuate the cycle themselves by believing in that. Once they take away the power from the degenerates, the degenerates again become marginalized, and the degenerates are now in the position of the traditionalists, and the
Right.
degenerates say that we have to take power from these
Yeah.
two-faced people who do evil in the name of God. These are not true men of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like a lot of how liberals speak when they are not in positions of power. They
They're hypocrite. The
compare
religious people are hypocrite. Yeah.
religious people are hypocrites. The moral majority people, all of them were like all of them were evil, or
The
that's
priests
how
are
they
all
used to talk.
molesters, right? That's what
All
they say.
molesters, yeah, we have to take power away from them because they don't know how to. We are much more and the liberals, they talk like this: we are much more
Yeah.
sympathetic to the little guy. We
Yeah.
That's why we can have power,
Right.
and we can we are much more better suited to power.
Yeah.
But this is like cyclical,
Yeah.
so that's like that's all of these people are acting on their anxiety, and being under the thumb, being under death's thumb. They're under anxiety of are being under power. So that's causing them to be such big fans of social engineering through the
Yeah.
use of coercion and violence. And they have to let go of that kind of anxiety, they have to let go of that kind of thing, and they have to approach history as and I write this in the article. They have to approach history in a way that as God approaches history. God allows human beings to organically think out for itself, how they're going to uh, carry out God's plan. God doesn't use coercion or violence. That's
Right.
completely like all of God's mission is perfectly exemplified in Jesus, in his
Yeah.
life. Like Jesus, not once did he use force, did not once did he use compulsion against anybody, even though he rebuked many, but he did not physically or use the threat of his disciples, the might of his disciples, to crush down on the Roman oppressors or the zealots or anybody. So we have to, Barjayev also says this, and I'm paraphrasing here. We have to find a way to work organically with God as if we are in a marriage with God, right? Like we cannot force our God's will onto anybody. So that's why the Grand Inquisitor he casts Jesus out into the dark
Yeah.
squares of the city.
Yeah.
So that's where Jesus was in the first place, healing and you know uh, healing the blind and uh, people from sicknesses and physical illnesses. And that's where the that's where humanity is going to be partnered with God. It's going to be humanity is going to be partnered with God outside of the institutions of power, right? Like outside of the in the dark squares where where the people are downtrodden, where the people are marginalized. So outside of the narrative. So that's where we have to go back to.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your time, sir. And check out aneighborschoice.com where you can read this article by our guest today, sir, at Christ versus the Inquisitor. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, you can email us at A Neighbor's Choice if you have a comment or guest suggestion or feedback on this topic. Hello at aneighborschoice.com. That's hello at aneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.